She nursed the stranger's horse back from colic. He nursed her dying orchard back to life. The horse was down in the road when Linnea Sharp found it. She had walked the half-mile from her farmhouse to the creek crossing to fill the water pails, and the animal was lying on its side in the dust, with its belly distended and its legs moving in slow, agonized circles. A big bay gelding, well-muscled, with a leather saddle still cinched tight and saddlebags hanging from the horn. No rider in sight. Linnea set the pails down and knelt beside the horse. She put her hand on its neck and felt the rapid, shallow pulse beneath the skin. Colic. She had seen it before. Her father had lost 2 horses to it when she was a girl, and she had watched him walk the second one for 6 hours straight, before its gut finally untwisted and it drank on its own. She loosened the cinch and pulled the saddle free, then got her hands under the horse's head and tried to coax it up. It took her 10 minutes. The animal was in too much pain to cooperate, but she was patient and persistent, and eventually she got it to its feet and began walking it in a slow circle in the road, talking to it the way her father had taught her, low and steady, words that meant nothing except that someone was there. She was on her 3rd circuit when the rider appeared. He came around the bend on foot, limping, with dust on his coat and a gash on his forehead that had bled into his eyebrow and dried there in a dark crust. He was tall, lean, somewhere around 40, with a face that looked like it had been carved from hardwood and left out in the weather. He stopped when he saw her walking his horse. "She threw me about a mile back," he said. His voice was hoarse. "Hit a prairie dog hole and went down hard. I've been tracking her." "Your horse has colic," Linnea said, not stopping. "How long since he drank?" "Yesterday morning. I was pushing to make Sutter's Crossing by nightfall." "That's your problem. You ran him too hard without water." She kept walking, her hand on the gelding's halter, her pace steady. "I need to get him to my barn. There's a mash I can make. Bran and warm water, with a little molasses. It'll help move whatever's blocked." The man looked at her, then at his horse, then back at her. "I don't even know your name." "Linnea Sharp. My place is up the road. Are you coming or not?" His name was Caleb Reinhardt, and he had been riding west from Abilene, with everything he owned in those saddlebags. He did not say why he was leaving or where he was going, and Linnea did not ask. She had learned long ago that men on the frontier carried their reasons the way they carried their guns, close to the body, with the safety on. She spent the rest of that afternoon and most of the evening tending the horse. She mixed the bran mash in a bucket and coaxed the animal to eat, then walked him in slow circles around the barn, while Caleb sat on an overturned crate with his head wound cleaned and bandaged with a strip of flour sack she had cut for him. He watched her work with an expression she could not read. Not surprise exactly, but something adjacent to it, as if he had forgotten that people did things like this for strangers. By midnight, the horse's belly had softened, and he was drinking on his own. Linnea checked his gums, felt his pulse, and nodded. "He'll be all right," she said. "Keep him off grain for 2 days. Just hay and water." Caleb stood up. "I owe you." "You don't owe me anything. The horse needed help." He looked at her for a long moment in the lamplight, and she saw something shift in his face, a crack in the careful blankness he wore like armor. Then he nodded and walked out to the barn to sleep beside his horse. Linnea stood in the kitchen after he left and listened to the silence settle back over the house. It was the same silence that had lived here since Everett died, thick and patient, filling every corner. She had grown used to it the way a person grows used to a limp, adjusting her gait until it felt almost natural. But tonight the silence had a different texture, thinner somehow, as if the presence of another person in the barn, even a stranger, had changed the weight of the air. She washed the blood from the strip of flour sack she had used to bandage his forehead. She checked the stove, banked the fire, and stood at the window looking out at the barn, where a thin line of lamplight showed beneath the door. Then she went to bed and lay awake for a long time, listening to the wind move through the dying orchard outside her window. In the morning, Linnea expected him to leave. Instead, she found him standing in her orchard. The orchard was the reason she had stayed on this land after her husband Everett died of typhoid 3 years ago. 22 apple trees that Everett had planted the year they were married. hauling the saplings in a wagon from a nursery in St. Louis. For the first 5 years, the trees had thrived, heavy with fruit every autumn, enough to sell at market and put money aside. But something had gone wrong in the last 2 seasons. The leaves had yellowed, the fruit had shrunk and spotted, and last fall she had harvested barely enough to fill a single bushel basket. She had written to the agricultural college in Lawrence, but no one had replied. Caleb was crouching beside one of the trees with his hands in the dirt. He had dug a shallow hole at the base of the trunk and was examining the roots. "Crown rot," he said when she approached. "See this?" He pointed to a section of bark near the soil line that was dark and spongy. "Water's been pooling here. The roots are drowning." She knelt beside him and looked at the roots he had exposed. They were dark and matted, wrapped in a slick layer of decomposing bark that smelled faintly of vinegar. She had never thought to dig beneath the surface. For 3 years, she had been treating the symptoms, pruning dead branches, clearing fallen fruit, watering more when the leaves curled, without ever looking at the cause. "How do you know that?" "I managed an orchard outside Abilene for 12 years, 60 acres of peach and apple." He stood up and brushed the dirt from his hands. "These trees aren't dead, but they will be by next spring, if you don't fix the drainage." Linnea looked at her dying orchard, the yellowed leaves, the bare branches, the small hard fruit that fell before it ripened, and felt the same helpless ache she had carried since Everett's death. The orchard was the last living thing he had given her. Watching it die felt like losing him again, one tree at a time. "Can you show me what to do?" she asked. "I can do better than that," he said. "If you'll let me stay a few days, I'll dig the drainage trenches myself." A few days turned into a week. A week turned into 2. Caleb worked from dawn to dusk, cutting narrow trenches between the tree rows and lining them with gravel he hauled from the creek bed in a wheelbarrow. He pruned the dead wood, stripped the rotted bark, and painted the exposed trunks with a lime wash that he mixed in Linnea's kitchen. He tested the soil by tasting it, a habit that made her stare, and amended the worst spots with composted manure from her chicken coop. He worked with the quiet, absorbed intensity of a man who understood growing things the way some men understood horses or guns. He did not talk much while he worked, but when he did, it was always about the trees, their root systems, their water needs, the angle of their branches relative to the sun. He spoke about them the way some men spoke about their children, with a tenderness that surprised her every time she heard it. Linnea found herself watching him from the kitchen window, not because he was handsome, though he was, in the weathered, angular way of men who had spent their lives outdoors, but because of the care he took, the way he handled each branch as if it mattered, the way he knelt in the dirt and worked the soil with his bare hands, patient and precise. She had not seen that kind of attention since Everett, and recognizing it in a stranger unsettled her in ways she was not prepared to examine. On the 10th day, she brought him coffee in the orchard and sat down on the grass beside the tree he was working on. "You said you managed an orchard in Abilene," she said. "What happened to it?" His hands stopped moving. He was quiet for a long time. "My wife died," he said finally, 3 years ago. "Consumption. After that, I couldn't. The orchard was hers, really. She was the one who loved it. I just did the work." He picked up a handful of soil and let it sift through his fingers. "I sold the land and started riding west. Didn't have a particular destination. Just couldn't stay." Linnea looked at him, at the grief carved into the lines around his eyes, at the dirt under his fingernails, at the careful way he held the soil, and she understood him completely, not because his story was the same as hers, but because the shape of his loss was familiar. She knew what it meant to stand in a place that someone you loved had built, and feel the absence like a physical weight. "My husband planted these trees," she said. "The year we married. I've been trying to keep them alive since he died, but I didn't know how. I just kept watering them and hoping. Sometimes too much water is worse than too little," Caleb said gently. She looked at him, and something passed between them that was not quite spoken, a recognition that they were no longer talking only about trees. Linnea felt it settle in her chest like a stone dropping into still water, sending ripples outward in every direction. She did not name it. She was not ready to name it, but she felt it, and she knew from the way his eyes held hers that he felt it too. "I'm starting to figure that out." He stayed through the summer. The drainage trenches worked. The standing water drained away. The roots began to dry, and the color of the bark began to shift from the sickly gray-brown of disease to something warmer and more alive. They fell into a routine without discussing it. Linnea cooked breakfast and supper. Caleb worked the orchard between meals. He fixed the gate on the chicken coop, replaced the broken handle on the pump, and rehung the barn door that had been sagging on its hinges since the previous winter. She did not ask him to do these things. He simply noticed what needed doing and did it, the way a man does when a place has begun to matter to him. In the evenings, they sat on the porch and talked. Or rather, Linnea talked and Caleb listened, occasionally offering a sentence or two that landed with the precision of a well-placed nail. She told him about Everett, how they had met at a church social in Independence, how he had proposed after 3 weeks, how they had driven the wagon west together with nothing but the saplings, a cook stove, and a dog named Captain who had died of a snake bite the first summer. She told him about the years of building, the house, the barn, the orchard, the life, and about the day Everett collapsed in the field with a fever that turned out to be typhoid, and how she had nursed him for 11 days before he died, with his hand in hers, and the apple blossoms visible through the bedroom window. Caleb listened to all of it without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time, and then he said, "He sounds like a man who knew what mattered." "He was," she said. "So are you." By August, the first new growth appeared on branches that had been bare for 2 seasons. Small green shoots, tentative and fragile, pushing out from the scarred wood like a declaration of intent. Linnea saw the new growth on a Tuesday morning and stood in the orchard with her hand over her mouth, unable to speak. Caleb found her there when he came out with his coffee, and he stood beside her and looked at the green shoots and said nothing, because nothing needed to be said. The first fruit came in September. Small, imperfect apples, some spotted, some lopsided, but real fruit, with real weight and real sweetness. Linnea picked one from the lowest branch and bit into it, and the juice ran down her chin, and she laughed for the first time in 3 years. It was a rusty sound, unpracticed, but it was real. She picked another, and another, cradling them in her apron like precious stones. Each one was a small miracle, proof that something she had believed was dying had been alive all along, waiting for someone who understood what it needed. Caleb was standing a few feet away, watching her, with an expression that was half smile and half something deeper. He had taken off his hat, and the late September light caught the gray at his temples and the deep lines around his eyes that softened when he looked at her. She held the apple out to him. "Taste it," she said. He took it. He bit into it. He chewed slowly, and when he swallowed, he nodded. "That's a good apple," he said. "It's the best apple I've ever tasted in my life." "It's not, but give it a year. Next season, once those roots are fully established, you'll have fruit worth taking to market." "Will you be here for that?" she asked. The question hung between them like the dust motes in the orchard light. She had not planned to ask it. It had simply come out, the way truth sometimes does when you stop trying to manage it. Her heart was beating hard, and she realized she was holding her breath, and she realized too that the answer mattered to her more than she had allowed herself to admit. Caleb looked at the trees, the new growth, the healing bark, the fruit hanging small and hopeful on the branches, and then he looked at her. "I've been riding west for 3 years," he said, "looking for something I couldn't name. I think maybe I found it standing in a road, walking a sick horse in circles." "That's not a yes," she said. "It's a yes," he said. That evening, they sat on the porch of the farmhouse and watched the sun go down over the orchard. The light came through the branches in long golden bars, and the leaves, green now, truly green, rustled in the evening breeze, and the small, imperfect apples glowed like lanterns in the fading light. Linnea reached over and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, rough, dirt-stained, steady. "Thank you," she said, "for the trees." "Thank you," he said, "for the horse." The orchard was quiet around them, and the evening was warm, and somewhere in the branches a mockingbird was singing the last song of the day. They sat together in the fading light, two people who had each lost something irreplaceable, and found, in the wreckage of that loss, something that could grow.